I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview Zach Greenwald. Zach has been with Expensify for over 8 years. He was hired as a member of the sales team, and Zach quickly adopted a hybrid role leading partner channels with accounting firms and integrated CRMs. He's since contributed to Expensify's nonprofit organization, worked on product development, and more recently has earned the title of Expensify's resident DJ. His passion for music has extended into live performances, most recently at Expensicon in Italy, which I got to see. And he also, on the side, works on original music production with the dream of playing at festivals one day. During this interview, we talked about his upbringing and his training to be a pro hockey player during high school and going into college, and how that training really helped him to be able to try new things, change up life when he needs to change up life, and put himself out there as an adult to take on new experiences, new hobbies, and really see what life has in store for him. I think there's so many great lessons in this episode, and I'm so excited for you to hear it, but also share it with people that need to hear it as well. We are honored that Expensify sponsored this episode. Expensify is a payment super app that helps individuals and businesses simplify the way they manage money. More than 12 million people use Expensify's free features, which include corporate cards, expense tracking, next day reimbursement, invoicing, bill pay, global reimbursement, travel booking, all in one app. To learn more about how Expensify can help save you time to focus on what really matters, check out use.expensify.com/spend management. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, and I am very excited to be here with Zach Greenwald from Expensify. And Zach, do you want to start off and just give us a little background on what you do at Expensify before we get started?
Yeah, so I'm on our sales team, and I also work in partnership development. So I manage a lot of the accounting firms within our partner channel as well. And I'm also involved in the product development as well.
Great. Awesome. So thanks for joining us today. And where we like to start is back where you began, just to get to know you and your path to where you are today. So where did you grow up? What did your parents do? Do you have brothers and sisters? That sort of thing. We can start there.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. The younger sister, were exactly 2 years and 1 day apart, which is kind of
wow.
So we've always shared birthdays growing up, which at first was, I would say, a little annoying as a kid, and then I've grown to just like really love it because we kind of just get to celebrate our birthdays together. Yeah. So on top of that, my parents. So let's say my dad's in the construction business, and so he does wholesale construction supply for a lot of commercial projects up and down the East Coast. And my mom is a travel agent, which has been pretty handy lately because we've been traveling a lot. And so as we kind of get to experience and travel the world, I always kind of lean on her for advice. And it's been great throughout the years.
Awesome. So what were your hobbies when you grew up? What things did you enjoy doing?
Yeah, so growing up, I played ice hockey my whole life.
Okay.
So that was kind of my passion as a kid. And, for me at first, it was something that really kind of just consumed my life. I would, on the weekends, travel up and down the East Coast. And, as I started getting into high school, I'd play hockey there. And then right around the time I was ready to graduate high school, I had the opportunity to play what's considered juniors, which is an opportunity to kind of put yourself to the test and see if you have what it takes to go pro. And a lot of hockey players that go to college, their freshman year, they're like 21 or 22 years old. They're a lot older than the normal freshmen. And that's because they take that time off after high school to play juniors. And, so for me, I really tried to put that to the test. And I learned a lot about myself during that phase. I would say, while all my friends were out having fun in their freshman years of college, for me, I was really trying to pursue this dream of obviously playing professional hockey one day. And, for me, going out and putting yourself on display in front of a lot of scouts and trying to make a name for yourself and really build like an individual brand around your name. It was a pretty hard thing to do. And
Yeah.
on top of that, your health is entirely dependent on how far you make it. And I had obviously opportunities to go play Division 1 NCAA hockey. And there was I would say a game up in Canada, and there's a lot of scouts there. And it was almost kind of, I would say, my big shot to see if I had what it take to make it to the next level. And I got hit pretty hard, blew out my shoulder in front of a bunch of scouts. And
Oh,
after that, I realized that nobody really wanted anything to do with me after that.
oh,
A lot of those like D1 offers turned into like small D2, D3 schools. And I'll actually never forget this. My dad, I was sitting there talking to him about it, and he was just like, I don't know if you're going to go pro, man. Like, I think you really need to think about going to a school that you think you'll have fun at, more importantly. And I was like, that's a pretty good idea. As a lot of the schools I was looking at were like, small schools up in New Hampshire. And I was just like, what? I got into Arizona State University, and they were starting to build a hockey program out in the desert, which is crazy. You wouldn't even
yeah.
think that. And so they took me in, and I started my freshman year at Arizona State. And I was one of the few, I would say, American players my freshman year that was on that freshman team, or I would say that freshman recruiting class. A lot of the team, or I'd say a lot of the freshman class were Canadian, mostly because they were going through kind of the same thing. They're like, man, I don't want to be up in the middle of Canada where it's freezing. Like, I'd rather go down where there's palm trees, pool parties, but still be able to play competitive hockey and have fun with it. So I went to Arizona State to pursue, I would say, hockey, but also to just enjoy myself as a collegiate student or as a collegiate athlete as well. And crazy enough, that team ended up becoming NCAA D1, I would say, a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I was part of that initial, I would say, rebuilding phase to get that team to kind of rise to that level of stardom where they could get a bid into the NCAA. My coach back then is still currently the head coach, and now they're playing teams like Minnesota, Boston University. They're pretty incredible. They've got this unbelievable arena that's brand new on campus, and now that I just moved to Arizona, excited for the season to kick off to finally be able to watch
can be
in
there.
person. And,
Yeah,
to get
that's
reactivated
awesome.
with it.
So many questions on this. So the whole fun idea with being on a really disciplined path to get to pro, that means it takes you away from a lot of regular times you would have had as a teenager. And I think that's pretty similar to anyone that's been really disciplined by their parents, and then they go to college and have this freedom that they've never had, or having to change that mindset of everything being for a purpose versus just to enjoy hockey. So how did you shift that mindset, or did you get in trouble initially and have to change yourself around? How did this go for you?
Yeah, what's interesting is like you work so hard towards a common goal as a kid, trying to pursue this dream. And for me, once I got to that college level, I actually started, like, interestingly enough, like losing interest. I was like, well, I'm not going to go pro. I'm here. I get to play a game that I love, but at the same time, like, it's consuming my weekend. So while all my friends are out having fun, all my new friends are out having a good time in college, I was playing hockey. And at the same time, I would be traveling almost every other weekend.
Right.
And I really formed some amazing relationships. And for me, it was, while I got to play a sport that I loved and represent the school that I was at, it was an incredible experience. But the injury that I endured early on in that career, when I kind of just decided to make that transition to Arizona State, really persisted. I blew my shoulder out in tryouts, and they still took me on. And then my freshman year, I would say about 12 games in, I tore my ACL and my MCL, and had to get taken to the hospital mid-game.
Oh, geez.
My season was over, and I worked really hard to get myself back to a healthy spot. And then I came back my sophomore year, hurt myself again. I got hurt maybe 12, same amount of games in. I got hurt 12 games in again. Season-ending injury, had to get surgery again. And then, admittedly, and I'm pretty open about this, I was pretty depressed. I felt like I was kind of going through depression a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a deep look at myself, and I was like, this is impacting my ability to excel in school.
Mm-hmm.
It's impacting my grades. And if I want to have a chance at making a better life for myself after college, I need to fix something. I need to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say after that second time I got hurt after surgery, I looked over at my dad, who's both of my parents, my sister, have been so incredibly supportive my entire life. But, I looked over at my dad and I was like, I think I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I can't put my body through this. And I think I just need to start focusing on a different direction. And he still tells me to this day, he's like, that when you told me that, he was like, that hurt me more than it hurt you. I could tell, because I've been your biggest fan since day one. And from there on out, I stopped playing. And I really just started focusing on school and figuring out how I can graduate through college and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Because when you work so hard at something, thinking that you know exactly what you want to do with your life, and through health and through injury, it's kind of just taken from you.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot to really sit back and reevaluate what you actually like, to reevaluate maybe a different path for you to go down. And I do believe that everything happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those things where I was like, you know what, like maybe this just isn't my path.
Yeah.
And I've been ignoring the signs for so many years, and it's time to start accepting new signs that have been thrown at me and explore a new path.
Yeah.
And that's really led me to where I am today with Expensify.
Yeah. So, talk about yoga philosophy, mindfulness philosophy, and business, just bringing that together. And one of the things that I talk about in my book about disconnect to connect is ego, and ego just being the root of all unhappiness, right? Like when you talk about being depressed, a lot of that is how we see ourselves. So for all those years, you saw yourself as this pro hockey player. Even if you didn't achieve it, it's how you saw yourself, right? And so we end up creating unhappiness in ourselves because we don't now know how to see ourselves, like, because we still have that, ego that's trying to protect us, or however that's serving us personally from a mindset perspective, and getting to the point of shedding that. A good example for me, similar, was when I sold my business. I sold my accounting practice, I think in 2010 or 11. And I remember like thinking I should be so happy. And I spent like 2 weeks really depressed. And I gave myself this like framework of like, okay, 2 weeks you can be sad. But I would make myself like go out and run and, try to do something each day. And I think the important thing when we go through those changes is just realizing that was how I defined myself. I defined myself as the owner of this accounting practice and being a specialist or expertise. But, even though it was a good thing to sell it, how do I define myself now, instead of just allowing what is it that you think that you did to help? Did you get outside help? Did you, what tools did you put in place to help you on that journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for me, I realized I needed to sort of like put myself out of my comfort zone. And when you put yourself out of your comfort zone continuously, it starts to get a little bit more comfortable, and you start to welcome, I would say, new challenges that come your way. And so for me, I was like, well, I might as well just force myself into the business world. I was a film major in college. I was like, I'm going to pick the easiest major. My classes were film. I was like, I was studying the history of cartoons and movie production and things like that, that actually didn't prepare me for the business world. And so I'll never forget this. My best friend's mom, who is basically a second mother to me, was working at a digital marketing company at the time. And she was like, hey, I think I can get you an internship, and you can get into digital marketing, and just give that a try. See if that's something that you want to do. And I was like, yeah, like if it, if it's something that can kind of help me change the path that I'm on, and I'll forever, be grateful for her for that. If that's something that I can kind of maybe shift my path with a little bit,
Mm.
absolutely. And so my junior year of college, I took on this internship with a digital marketing company in downtown Phoenix. And I forced myself into the business world, even though my prior jobs were working security at a bar on our college street, and prior to that, working at a deli at home in my hometown in Maryland. You know, for me, I wasn't really selling. This was my first real exposure into the business world and actually having a cubicle and things like that that actually don't exist today at Expensify, but things that kind of prepared me for this. And so I just kind of welcomed that new opportunity, and I was definitely nervous going into it. But I learned, I would say, not just about just being in the business world, but I learned a lot about myself that, even if it's scary at first, just jumping in head first and learning as you go is the best way to continue to just level up in your life. And if you don't
Yeah.
take those chances, you'll never know what you're capable of. And that was something that I learned pretty quickly.
Well, and wouldn't hockey have prepared you for that with having a strategy and a plan and how you kind of put that together without realizing you did?
Yeah, I think like when it comes to hockey, you deal with adversity all the time. It's
Mhm.
whether you want to level up and play on the first line or be a starter versus, being a bench player or not getting accepted to be able to play in that game because you didn't make the starting lineup. Or, just there's just different levels of adversity too. Like when you are putting yourself on display in front of a scouting camp to see if anyone likes you and if you're able
Mhm.
to make it to that next level, it's basically being able to rise to the occasion where you know that this is your one shot to kind of get to that next level. And I would say going through that so many times throughout my years playing hockey, I
Mhm.
would say mentally prepared me to take on a new path.
I would
I wasn't
also say
necessarily.
probably just dealing with rejection too,
What's that?
right? Dealing with rejection.
Dealing with rejection too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was a huge part of it where
Mhm.
like, obviously when you go into any interview,
Mhm.
you're going into it thinking like, hey, you might get this job, but like you're also people generally are scared going into interviews in the business world for just pure fear of rejection. It's the same
Mhm.
reason why people get nervous before dates.
Right.
Fear of rejection is something that everybody has. And I would say I was, rejected in sports growing up. And it's something that I learned to kind of overcome that fear.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't say even overcome it because I think it's just human nature, but at least push it to the side and show a version of yourself that you didn't know that you had. And sometimes throughout that journey, you surprise yourself.
Yeah.
And I've kind of continued to surprise myself throughout the years.
Well, you have to have confidence in yourself that, you might not be right for that person or that team or even that day,
For
but
sure.
you will tomorrow or you'll find the right person. Like you have to be so sure of your vision and what you're trying to achieve that those rejections, you can like get past it because there'll be a yes somewhere.
Yeah, and I think that's something too, that has something to say about imposter syndrome. Like, I think there's
Mhm.
a difference between like confidence
Yes.
and showing confidence because like you have imposter syndrome, or at least trying not to show that you're scared
Yeah.
when you have imposter syndrome, or just
Yeah.
knowing that you have imposter syndrome. I
Uh-huh.
didn't go to business school. I didn't have a business degree. And now I work at a publicly traded company. And sometimes I still wonder how I even got here. And I've just tried to accept it. And the same thing goes into this new passion project of mine, which is getting into music. I absolutely have imposter syndrome. Like you were at Expensicon too in Italy. And that was my first real opportunity to play music, which is something obviously we can kind of get into. But I absolutely have imposter syndrome in that area, but you learn to accept it and kind of eventually as you continue to just accept that you're going through or you're experiencing imposter syndrome, then the imposter syndrome naturally just kind of goes away and you're like, this is actually me and I'm doing this and this is
Yeah,
great.
so I have to tell you a funny story about that. So the whole reason we got connected was because I was talking to Lindsay about you. So my son is also so for his I mean, when he graduated from high school, he's in college right now. But I was trying to figure out like a good gift for him. So he played electric guitar in high school. And but when he was going to college, I was like, he'd always walk around the house beatboxing. So I'm going to
That's
get him a
awesome.
DJ set. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he started DJing, and we both have a love for EDM and, finding videos on YouTube and gone to some festivals. And so, for his 21st birthday, I got him tickets for Marshmello in Las Vegas, and we went there.
What a
Um,
21st birthday present. That's
oh my
incredible.
God, it was so fun. So and one of the things we also did with it was he would DJ my yoga classes as he was learning so that we'd
That's
have like
awesome.
live music. Yeah. So but we always pass back and forth DJ. I'm in Italy, and your DJ tag sounded like it was like a famous person. I'm like, do I not know this DJ? And I, wouldn't have put it past David to hire someone, like well named. And I'm like, oh my God, if I tell Jagger, my son, that there was a DJ here that he knew and I didn't know who it was, like, so I was like searching your name online. Like I was trying to figure out, like, so I didn't screw up with my son. And then I talked to Lindsay, and she's like, no, we gave him a chance to DJ. He works here. I was like, oh, how cool is that? So just so you know, that was like my personal story with it. I didn't want to look stupid in front of my son not knowing a DJ.
That is so funny. You aren't the only person that tried to Google me and see if Verdecito was like some
Yeah.
famous
And it was
DJ.
coming up like what the meaning of Veracito was. Like nothing was
Yeah.
coming up. I'm like, all right, I give up.
I've
So
got a
it's
good
not
story on
it.
that too. We can get into that whenever you're ready. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was a cool experience.
So let's start. So how did that even start?
So, I would say first off, like I'm super blessed to be in a company whose culture, where the culture is not only to just show up and work hard and obviously help the company grow, but they really empower you to carry out your passion. Like
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I interviewed at Expensify, when you go through this, I would say pretty grueling interview process. The last bit of that interview, David, you go one-on-one with David. And for me, David came into this room in San Francisco and he was like, so what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I don't know, man. I just got hired here. Like, I think I want to work here. And I didn't have an answer for that, to be completely
Yeah.
honest. And deep down, he was looking for people who had big dreams and aspirations to do something that's much bigger than Expensify in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And he has always expressed that he wants Expensify to be a launching pad for anybody in the company to carry out any of their dreams.
That's awesome.
And it's pretty incredible. So going back to
Before
that,
you go into that, how did you even get to Expensify? Like, how did you get introduced there?
yeah, so as I'd mentioned, when I kind of started going down that new path in college, I got this internship in Phoenix. And the guy that I was sitting next to in the cubicle next to me, David Cardoza, who is currently still at Expensify, he got a job at Expensify about 2 years before, about a year and a half before I did. So he got the job at Expensify pretty early on. And then I remember about a year and a half later, I got a Facebook message from him. And he was like, hey, Expensify is hiring. Like, would you be open to move to San Francisco? I was like, yes, absolutely. Like, I was going through somewhat of a tough time in Phoenix. I wasn't really enjoying my job, which ended up, that internship landed to be a full-time job after college. And I wasn't really enjoying it. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. So let's say probably about a few months after that, I got flown out for an interview at Expensify. We were so young at the time, like maybe 50 employees. And I flew out for the interview. It was intense. You're in this unbelievable office overlooking downtown San Francisco. It was my first time there. It's 6 hours of interviews and challenges, and I got through it and got the job and never looked back. And it was honestly the best thing that could have ever happened to me.
Yeah. Well, and I love this question of what you want to do with your life, because you would think he's looking for something there,
For sure, 100%.
but he's really
Yeah,
looking for saying, let it support whatever your dreams are. That's amazing.
yeah.
So
I
how'd
think
you
it
get,
kind of. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, that I was just asking, how did you get there to what that is bigger than Expensify?
Yeah, and I think too, like admittedly, like David, if you're listening, like I finally know what I want to do now. But like for the last 8.5 years, 8 years, I've never really known what I wanted to do outside of building a career at Expensify. I never had like a passion project, I would say, on the side that
Mhm.
would get me equally excited to wake up every day to take on Expensify challenges, but to also work on a passion project until I would say around COVID is
Mhm.
when I started picking up DJing.
How did that
And
start?
so I've always, I would say when I moved to growing up, I would always listen to like hip hop and rock. I was never really exposed to electronic music until I
Mhm.
came out to Arizona State for my freshman year. And I remember going to my first show, and it was Tiesto in Las
Mhm.
Vegas at the Hard Rock Hotel. And I didn't know what to expect, but I was with like a lot of my closest friends. We were all front row, and that kind of just like really opened my eyes to DJs, how they control a room, the type of
Mhm.
music that just like lifts you up. It was like a pretty euphoric experience.
Yeah.
And I left there just like sort of obsessed. I was like, I'd go home and every day I would search online for new music. I would follow new artists and kind of watch them progress. And I've always sort of been jealous, I would say. Like, even when I go to a concert or a show today, I'm like, damn, like, what do I have to do to get up there?
Yeah.
So it just starts with taking that first step. And for me, I downloaded this app on my iPad and I started like messing around with it and kind of learning, basically trial and error.
Mhm.
And then I remember during COVID, I purchased a DJ controller, and we had nothing. We couldn't even leave our condo.
Yeah.
So me and my wife, we would have some fun with it. I would DJ for her, and we would drink wine, we would try to make the most out of being on lockdown.
Yeah.
And I just kind of kept going. I was, watching tutorials on YouTube. I was upgrading my DJ gear, and I just continue to practice every day, and I still do because it's fun. And I think too, it was almost an escape for me because during
Mhm.
COVID, when you're on lockdown, your house is your office.
Right.
So our second bedroom was my office. And I
Right.
found that, when I didn't have anything else to do, I would just work.
Right.
And I just kept working. And it was like, Friday night, I'm still working. And my wife's like, let's hang out. Let's do something. I'm like, you're right. Like, and so I was like, I should kind of figure out, like, maybe take this a bit further and start practicing more and treat this more as like a passion project.
Mhm.
And I did. I started taking it more seriously. I would log off at a certain hour and start playing. And then kind of once COVID restrictions lifted, we'd go out with our friends in Portland and then have an after party at our condo and would DJ for them. And I'll never forget. So I never really had, I would say, a lot of confidence in myself. I never really put myself to the test. I'm playing at home. I'm having a good time until two of our best friends got married in Mexico. And they were like, hey, do you want to DJ at like our welcome party?
Yeah.
This is like my first time actually playing in front of people I don't know, that's not just like my wife in the kitchen.
Right.
And I was like, you know what, this is good for me. Like, this is how I kind of level up
Right.
and put myself to the test, like put myself in an uncomfortable situation that I'm going to go out there, expose myself, see if I'm any good, see if people like it. I could suck, people might not like it, and I'll
Yeah.
find out really quickly if I'm any good or if this is
Right.
something I should keep doing. And it's like, you have to just take that leap. So I was like, absolutely. And first off, I was absolutely like honored to even be considered. So I really started taking it seriously after that. I was like, this is kind of like a big break for me. I was going
Yeah.
home, I was like organizing my music files, I was practicing every single day, trial and error, learning from my mistakes. And then that boat party happened. It was like a boat party in Mexico. There was like 100 people on board, and people were jumping up and down, going crazy. Like, it was just such a rewarding experience that, like, going into it, my heart was racing.
Yeah.
I was super nervous, and after that was done, it was just like the best feeling. I was like, damn, that was so much fun. And I
Uh-huh.
was so nervous, but now I feel so good and like so validated at the same time because people think I'm good.
Yes.
And I was like kind of going from imposter syndrome to like, this might actually be something. I don't know.
Yeah.
After that, I started putting out mixes, and I was like, wow, if people like are hitting me up after like, hey, did you record that? Like, can I get some of your music? I was like, why don't I start recording my music and putting it on SoundCloud. And so that's kind of where it all kind of started escalating. I would start putting out new mixes. And then we started planning for Expensicon in Italy. And we always, I'm sure, have you heard of our offshore trip that we do every year?
Yeah. But the viewers probably have, the audience probably hasn't, so you can explain that.
Yeah,
I think
for
it's
sure.
so great.
So
Yeah.
every year, Expensify, we spend 3 weeks in a different country, and it's called offshore. And so we do this because we're largely a remote company. Everybody, all of our employees work all over the world, and we communicate every day through Slack. But it's an opportunity for us to get everybody together in the same location and, build those relationships. And on top of that, they're some of our most productive weeks because we set goals for the company as we go into each offshore, whether it's building new features. And some of our best features were built and deployed during offshore, which is pretty incredible. So, anyways, every time we go to offshore, the last week is usually a more upscale week where we get to stay in a nice hotel. And then there's like a big event where we hire a local DJ. And I remember the last offshore was in Spain, and there was a DJ there, and everyone was like kind of loving this guy, but I was like, I think I'm better. Like, I think I could do better than this guy. And everyone was having so much fun. I was like, I think I could do this, like, so much better.
Uh-huh.
And so, as we were planning, planning Expensicon, they were looking at local DJs in Italy, and they were like sharing like their price tags. I was like, guys, this is like so expensive. Like, why are we paying for these DJs that no one's ever heard of? They're
Right.
gonna play like top 40. It's gonna be kind of the same song and dance.
Right.
And I was like, let me throw my hat in the ring. And on top of that, like, I'm free. You don't have to pay me.
Right.
So they were like, cool, well, send us a mix. Like, we want to hear you and compare you to the other DJs that, we're considering hiring for this big event. So I went home, I put together a mix. Like, first try, I was like, damn, this is pretty good. And it's different. It's a unique sound that, it's not top 40, but it's fun. It's a little bit of like disco, some, music that people can resonate with, but it's just upbeat and it's different. And I think different will get people dancing.
Yes.
So I submitted the mix, and everyone was like, damn, this is like pretty good. And like a week went by and more people started playing it. And they were like, I got a message from one of our employees in London. They're like, yo, we're playing this mix in London. Like, it's amazing. We love it. And then they ended up being like, hey, we're going to go with you to play at Expensicon. And I was like, holy shit, this is it. Like, this is once again kind of leveling up.
Right.
And going from playing in front of like 100 people that all know and are very familiar with the electronic music scene to 300 plus people who might not know what electronic dance music is, who might actually still know what it is, but you really have to put yourself to the test. And oh man, going into that night, my heart was beating through my chest. I was practicing every single day. I like upgraded my decks at home, my gear, and I was like, just making sure that like this is something that I was taking seriously. And I reassured everybody who picked me. I was like, guys, like, I'm not going to let you down. This is going to be a fun night that everyone's going to remember, and I'm not going to mess this up. So going into that night, and even before that, I remember like we all get to kind of meet George Clooney, and who was at Expensicon, and we had George Clooney as our keynote speaker, and I was like, George, like, you would make my entire career if you came up on the DJ booth with me. And he didn't say yes, but he didn't say no, and kind of laughed at me a little bit. And I was like, all right, going into that night, now I'm double nervous. Like, I'm playing in front of a bunch of people I don't know. George Clooney might be there, and this is like a huge break for me. Like, who knows where we can go after this?
Yeah.
So going into that night, I would say everything went super well. Playing for 4 hours is harder than you think. Most DJs play for like an hour and a half. But I left that event, went back to my hotel room, and I just couldn't stop smiling. I was like, once again, you put yourself out of your comfort zone and you put yourself to the test. And you showcase yourself. And it goes back to everything that I've learned growing up too, of showcasing yourself. You have this one shot to help you level up in your life. And this was kind of, potentially an opportunity for me to level up in music and see where I can kind of go with this passion project that I really love so much.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things I've learned from watching my son DJ is it seems like it's just easy to mix those things. He's an engineer, and I'm like, you kind of need an engineering mind. It's like so specific, like
Yeah.
mixing beats. And like for me, I have always played music as well, but like to me that seems like so much work. Like I thought it would be more like just, oh, I'll throw this one in or I'll throw that one in. But you
Oh,
have to
for
know
sure.
exactly where you're gonna transition and that your transitions are right. And I was like, wow, this is like exact to every beat you play for 4 hours. Like people don't realize the amount of effort that goes into DJing.
Yeah, there's, I would say, definitely a big learning curve. And I would say throughout the years, even since COVID, just practicing every day and
Yeah.
trial and error and be like, okay, that didn't sound right. Like, how do I switch this up?
Hmm.
Led me to that moment where I could play a great set that
Yeah.
everyone could still talk about.
Yeah.
And I still
Well,
get text messages from
yeah.
attendees to this day.
But I do want to focus on, because you've said it a number of times, and it is what you learned growing up. In order to perform at an elite level, you have to practice. And I think a lot of people show up without practicing, without understanding what it takes to get to a certain level, or they look at other people and just want to get there, but
Mhm.
not understanding the work and the alone time that you have to spend in order to get to that. Like I played violin and viola growing up, and people don't realize how many times you play the same measure over and over and over for like an hour to get it right, but you're hearing the composition, when you go to a symphony, not realizing what all the time each person had to take individually by themselves, work with their teachers on what wasn't working, and then as a group to keep drilling and drilling. And drills, right? Like as a athlete. And so in order to take on anything, like I've always thought that helped me. People would always ask, about how I started keynoting or how I got that in my life. I've always attributed it to my music background because I knew how to practice, set up the experience, know what, dramatics, loud, soft, fast, slow, all of those things that you have to put into music is really into these other things as well.
Yeah, I think, I would say a ton of practice, 100%. I completely agree with that. Like, I would not have performed at the same level as I did that night if I didn't spend every day practicing for hours, just getting ready for that big moment. And on top of that, when you're up on a stage in front of hundreds of people, that wasn't my first time. And I'm not
Right.
referring to the
Mm-hmm.
time where I got to play at our friend's wedding,
Got to
but
test.
yeah, but I speak at Sweet World every year.
Uh-huh.
So I go to Sweet World, an accounting conference, and because I'm one of the channel leads for NetSuite, and
Mm-hmm.
I speak at that conference every year. And the first time I did it, and every year I go up on stage, I'm always a little nervous, but
Right.
I've always, I have, I'll be the first to admit that like stage fright, I have it, other people
Yeah.
have it. And anytime I go up on stage at a conference in front of hundreds of people talking about accounting, and walking through our platform and how we could save time in their lives, I have to practice. I practice in front of a mirror, I practice in front of my wife, I practice in front of colleagues, and I go into it and I'm still a little nervous because you're all eyes are on you.
Yeah.
And I think the experience over the last years being able to speak publicly and kind of work on that as something that I want to get better at, just public speaking in general,
Yeah.
mentally prepared me for being on stage in front of hundreds of people in Italy.
Well, and that's where it goes. Like, I had an experience a little bit ago where I was running from place to place between different conferences and trying to get everything set up and make sure it was ready. And people were coming into the room before I really had enough time to make sure everything was ready. And I looked through things, and then I had to stop myself and say, just trust the process. Like, you've trained for this, let this go. And so
Uh,
like that is the most important thing, that if you're prepared, because day of want to force more detail, but your brain can only take so much more in a hyper intense situation. So you have to have prepared up to that point. and know, even if you missed your mark 20% of the time, you know, most people won't know that. And you're delivering a great experience because of the training and the practice you've done up till then.
That's actually a really good point to bring up because I think the expectation of anybody who's on stage or has to perform, they think the people that are listening to you are expecting perfection and that
Oh,
it's not okay to mess up, but it's absolutely okay. And it happens to everybody.
right.
And I follow a lot of different artists on Instagram, and conveniently the week before Italy, this DJ was kind of explaining how if you were to mess up a transition in your set, no one's going to realize that or remember it. They're just going
Right.
to remember how much fun they had. And the same thing goes for just like public speaking in general. Like if you forgot to say something, people aren't going to know that.
Yeah.
Like you're going to know it, but you're just going to have to get over it and push yourself to be better next time. And I think that's
Right.
something that I try to carry with me in any opportunity that I get.
So who are your favorite DJs to follow?
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I think right now there's a guy, a DJ named John Summit, who I like for a few reasons. I like his music, but he was an accountant at
Okay.
Ernst& and Young, maybe like 7 years ago, and he didn't actually like his day to day. He just wasn't enjoying his job, and he was DJing at small bars in Chicago and kind of trying to make a little side money. And he was, during COVID, there was a very popular song on TikTok that he made a remix of. And he made this one song, and all of a sudden it just gets played everywhere.
Wow.
And he quit his job at Ernst& Young. I think it was EY, don't quote me on that, and started pursuing his DJ career. And he started playing, creating new music, playing in front of 50 people to 100 people to 1,000 people to 10,000 people to 50,000 people. And he rose to this like level of stardom that was so fast within a 2 to 3 year span that it's not just the music that I love to listen to, but his path is just super
Human side.
admirable.
Hmm.
And it got me leaning into music production as well, which is kind of this like new avenue that I'm
That's what my
taking.
son's doing
So,
now too. Yeah.
and learning new software, and
Yeah.
I watch webinars or I watch DJs like producers,
Yeah.
put on, episodes on YouTube on how to produce, and I watch that a lot on my free time. And so I'm producing now, which is exciting. I'm not great at it.
Yeah.
But it's trial and error again, just like DJing or learning how to DJ at first. It's trial and
Yeah.
error, and maybe by some mistake, some miracle, a great song will come out of it, and who
Yeah.
knows what will happen.
Yeah, that's what my son's working on right now. And it's like starting over again of
Yeah,
learning
exactly.
a whole new language. And one of the things he's working on, that he played electric guitar when he grew up, and now figuring out how to incorporate that into the music production, do
Mhm.
some riffs. So it's pretty cool, like all the stuff you could create. So, and to
Yeah,
have YouTube at your fingertips to learn anything, right? Like, you know, you can with practice and intention, because you have to make the time. So I would ask you, how do you make the time for it with a busy job?
yeah. And I think too, like, and I wanted to get into that because obviously, like, my priority is Expensify, and I work all day, every day on Expensify, and I still find time to pursue this side project. But I'll never forget this. This was 4 years ago, maybe. We have a company all hands like every month, and David leads our company all hands. And he walked in one day and he was like, all right, life goals for everybody. I want to live rich. I want us all to have fun, and I want us all to save the world. And we were like, what? Like, what does that all mean? And we were just like, after the all hands, we are like, man, like, what is he even talking about? And he kept saying it, and then he would define it. And then he would continue to say it to the point where we're like, okay, cool. Like, this actually makes a ton of sense. And when you expand on it, he's empowering us all individually to basically live a life where you can live rich, have fun, and save the world. And it sounds easier said than done, but the way these are defined are actually pretty unique. So to live rich is basically you're establishing a comfortable baseline where your most average boring day is still pretty great. So I'm happy with my job. I wake up every day, and like I said, we don't really have I would say, positions in the company. We have different teams. And if
Hmm.
you don't like what you're doing one day, you can work on something different. And so, like, I worked on sales, I worked in the partnership side, I still do both. I participated in marketing, I work on product development, I've helped out with our nonprofit. And I get to wake up every day and experience new challenges. Every day is different, which actually allows me to wake up and get excited about the day. But it also, attributes to being able to live rich, where I have a job that gives me comfortable pay and still encourages me to carry out my passions in life. And then there's have fun. And it doesn't mean for having fun, it doesn't mean like going to a concert with friends, but it's more geared towards hard fun, something that kind of puts you out of your comfort zone and makes you, feel rewarded when all is said and done. And, hard fun is usually done in the way it's defined, is usually done with other people, sometimes with people that you don't know at the start, but you form these relationships at the end. And hard fun are these like bucket list, fun things that maybe you couldn't afford or endure, or even imagine. And for me, that have fun moment was DJing at Expensicon. Like I
Hmm.
felt like a like professional DJ. The
Yeah,
production was insane. There was
it
LED screens.
was the
People were
lighting and
dancing. Like,
all the stuff happening behind you. Yeah, it was
yeah,
so cool.
that was kind of like my moment of fame. And it was
Yeah.
like Expensify kind of empowered me and gave me that opportunity to carry out what felt like a pipe dream for me, turn into like a bucket list thing, to be able to play in front of like people like that and a bunch of people I don't know and have a stage like that. It was incredible.
Right.
So live rich and have fun, like that's what those two mean. And then save the world, which, it's not just going out there and like being like, hey, I'm going to save the world. And sometimes it's something super ambitious that seems unachievable. People say they want to save the world all the time and they might have an idea and then they might give up. But we continue to kind of basically, continue to embed this into our company's philosophy, that no matter what we do, we also want to save the world with what we're doing. And I don't know how I want to tie that into my side project right now of music. But what was really cool is I got to participate and we did a community justice grant challenge for Expensify.org, which is our nonprofit arm. And it really exposed me to all of the, I would say, injustices that people are out there solving in their communities. And, I would not have learned about kind of this other side where, obviously there's a bunch of people out there that are really trying to make a difference. And there's obviously ways that we can help. So the Community Justice Grant Challenge, and just to kind of summarize what that was for anyone who's listening who isn't familiar with that, basically we had anybody all over the world who had an idea for how they could save the world submit a proposal to us, and we got thousands of proposals, and there was a structure to it. It's like, what's the problem you're solving and how are you going to solve it? And we reviewed thousands of applications and interviewed thousands of these like nonprofits and change makers around the world. And the way that we built our solution to save the world was basically anytime they spend their own money towards their nonprofit or towards their mission, they would submit it to us and we would match it. So basically, if they had X in funds, they now have 2X in funds. As long as they work with us, we'll continue to help power and encourage them to double down on their efforts. And so the reason why I wanted to bring this up is, while I don't know what I want to do with music and how that can kind of save the world, maybe it's, taking what I've learned throughout the years in music once I get to a good place and reteach it to others. But I was exposed to how the company has used its platform to help save the world. And that was a really awesome experience to be a part of. And even today, we still reimburse grocery receipts for people in SNAP. And so it was just it's an awesome thing that we're doing, that we're still doing, and something that I'm still very passionate about as well.
That's awesome. I would say everyone, sometimes you don't realize the small things that you do to save the world, and providing people 4 hours of joy
It can
and
help.
remembering how to feel light and dance and enjoy, like you did, so it's those little moments. It's sometimes we think it has to be these huge things, but I think each person has their impact when it's intentional. And although you were also achieving your dream, at the same time, you were helping others to find some joy in their day as well. So I think you should be proud of that.
That means the world to me. Thank you.
Yeah, that was awesome. So, all right. So there's so many great things for people to learn from this interview, but I'd like to end with some rapid fire questions. So you pick a category, either family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Ooh, spiritual. That's gonna
Okay,
be, yeah.
good. All right. Things or actions that I don't have that I want to have with spirituality. So things or actions I don't have that I want to have.
Things or actions that I don't have that I want to have. It's a tough one. Maybe I picked the wrong category.
Well,
I
you
feel like
can,
I have everything, like I'm so
yeah.
happy with like everything that's going on in life right now. It's hard to
From
really
a
answer that
spiritual
question.
perspective. Yeah. So you can pick family and friends, money, or health as well. So,
Go with family and friends.
okay. Yeah, that's the one I notice most people do.
Went down
um,
the wrong path there for a second.
all right. So things or actions I don't have that I want.
Things or actions that I don't have that I want. Yeah, you know what? Since moving away, so I grew up in Maryland. Since moving away from Maryland, obviously I don't have those deep relationships. I'm still very close with everybody that I've grown up with. But moving away and being in a different time zone and it's not excuses, but it did impact the relationships. I would say the level of depth in our relationships. So I am trying to make a better effort and call and text more, but that's something that I wish I had.
Yeah. Okay.
Same with
Things
family as
or
well.
actions I do have that I want to keep with my family and friends.
I'm conscious of that. I could not be conscious of the fact that I need to continue to check in with family and friends and be there for them and
Mhm.
ask them questions about their lives. And I am conscious of that. And it's helped me to maintain good relationships
Yeah.
with friends across the country and even coworkers that are in a completely different time zone that I've built relationships with over the years.
Things or actions I don't have that I don't want to have.
Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want to have. To be honest, I spend so much time on, I would say, work, and then on the side, more time as well on my passion project that I want to spend more time focusing on just developing relationships, doing more fun things with my wife, when it's not 110 degrees here in Arizona, go on more walks, just go outside more. And I don't, when I'm stuck inside on my computer 24/7, I'm
Mhm.
taking my natural surroundings for granted, and I wish I had that more. I wish I
Yeah.
could do that more.
And I think it's good when you can recognize that and see where you need to stop because DJing is a very individual
It is.
passion as well. Yeah.
I'm very thankful to have a wife that's so supportive in both
Yeah.
areas, but I need to focus more on her and going out more as well. And I think that's something that I want to
Yeah.
build on.
Awesome. So as we close out, is there anything that you want to make sure people take away from this episode that we haven't talked about or you want to just emphasize?
Yeah, I would say first off, I'm thankful to Expensify for giving me a platform to be able to take a passion project and continue to build on it and allow them to support me on that dream. But at the same time, if there's anything that you're passionate about on the outside that's outside of your work that can help you kind of expand on your creativity, do it. There's nothing more rewarding than being able to apply yourself creatively in something else. And taking that leap, no matter how nervous you are going into an opportunity, the reward's always worth it. And that's something that I've learned over the years.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. I'm excited to share it with our listeners.
Thank you for having me.
And now for our mindful moments on this interview with Zach, which was so inspiring to hear someone's story of just finding a passion and finding something that was so unexpected in their life that they're finding so much joy out of. And we really began talking about his upbringing and really working to become a pro hockey player one day when he was in high school and up to college. And when all of that changed and he got injured during a tryout, and that dream of being a pro hockey player disappeared very fast. That once this happened, and we all have these moments that we've worked so hard for, and you're at that critical moment, and life puts a fork in the road and changes it. And I think it was really important the things that he learned from it because he kept trying to keep that passion that he had in his life and still play hockey after he was injured and found that he kept getting injured and really making that very hard decision to change his life and give up hockey. And one of his takeaways with it was really learning that, because of hockey, he had lost out on having a lot of fun with his friends and that he was missing out on a lot of things that he wanted to be a part of. And if he wasn't going to go pro, why was he giving up that time? And I think so many times we keep pushing against a dream, whether it's in business, whether it's us personally, and we don't really weigh the pro and cons of to keep pushing against something that's pushing back at us just as hard, if not harder. And so going through that process of giving up something that you would work so hard for is just soul crushing sometimes. And like we talked about, he really did go through a depression at that time and snapped himself out of it by really taking a look at himself and asking himself, what can I do different? So if what I'm doing right now is not working, what are the things that I can do differently in my life? And one of the things that he talked about was getting out of his comfort zone. And so many times he had to get out of his comfort zone in hockey in order to put himself in front of scouts and really be competitive and so forth. So he knew he had the skill of getting uncomfortable, but he had to force himself to find what is that going to be where he's not the expert. He's not the one in the room that knows everything, and he's got to learn. And so he talked about how his best friend's mom got him into business and gave him an internship really with very little experience, and how that really helped him to be able to gain the experience to do the things that he's done today. So if he hadn't gotten injured, where his path would be versus now being able to explore different things about himself and finding out what he's really good at. The other thing was that he really had to realize that going into something that he wasn't good at, he might deal with rejection. And that was also a skill. He realized that from his childhood and from being in hockey, that it was something that he could overcome, that he knew the process to overcome rejection, especially when you're put in a sales and marketing position and you have rejection happening all the time in your daily life when you're trying to put yourself out there to sell new things. And so instead of taking it hard, how do you go learn from it, push it aside, and keep taking on the next thing? And his next thing was starting to work at Expensify. And one of the things that changed him was a question that he got from David Barrett, who is the CEO of Expensify, during his interview. And the question was, what do you want to do with your life? And so many of us think we know what that answer is, but if you actually sat back and wrote that question for yourself right now, and sometimes that question, the answer to it changes. We feel we got what we thought we wanted to do with our life, and maybe that's not the thing that's actually bringing us joy like we thought it would. And so to still ask that question no matter where we are in our life is a really important thing, because we never want to stop striving for that next best self or that next something that's going to give us joy. So he really couldn't answer that question at the time, and he kept exploring that. And during COVID, really got back to music. And he had gotten exposed to music by seeing a DJ while he was in college. And he decided during COVID to download an app and really start learning how to DJ. And I think this was a really important piece of this interview, is that anything that we do to get out of our comfort zone and we're trying something new, we have to remember how we learn. And how we learn is practicing many times. So it's really important that if we're going to try a new skill and get better at something, that we've actually put time aside to take it seriously and to practice. Because, a lot of adults I've seen try new things and then they're not good at it right away and they give it up and think that they should just be as good as anyone else. I know in yoga, I say it all the time to new people, is that to not expect to be as good as the person that has been coming in for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, and instead to respect the experience. of people that have been putting the time to practice and keep honing their skills and so forth. And so anything that we're doing, that's the learning process. That's when we get outside of our comfort zone of not being the best at something, but looking to someone else and learning from them and not being afraid to ask questions and remembering to set that time to make sure that you are practicing. The other thing we talked about that is really, really important is that you find ways to rehearse it in small ways. So he talked about that the first time he played was just with his wife, and then he started branching it out to some friends, and then he gets asked to play with his friend's wedding. And so that was a small wedding party, and then he got his confidence there. So when he finally put himself out there to play at this event this past summer at Expensicon in Italy, he had the experience of performing. It wasn't the first time he had ever performed before. So I think when we talk about anything we're going to go into new, whether it's in business, whether it's outside of business, we need to think about our rehearsal process. We need to think about our practicing and putting the right amount of time instead of rushing through our day. If it's really important to us, it's important that we're practicing those skills each day and how we're going to go about doing that. So when you're thinking about a hobby or a new initiative in business and it's something that you've never done and it is a new skill, also think about how are you going to learn it? How are you going to put the time aside to learn it? How are you going to practice? How are you going to rehearse so that you are ready for that game day? You are ready for when it launches, that it's not a surprise, that you can trust the process that you've gone through, that you will be a success. And like Zach said, how he ended it was that anything that you are passionate about, just go and do it. Don't make excuses for why you can't do it, but find the little ways that you can do it and just take the leap to do that. I want to thank Expensify again for sponsoring this episode. Again, Expensify is a payment super app that helps individuals and businesses simplify the way they manage money. To learn more about Expensify and how it can help save you time to focus on what really matters, check out use.expensify.com/spend management, and that will be in the show notes as well. I hope you got so much out of this episode that you can share it with your friends and family and reach out and let us know other topics that you want me to interview or talk about on the podcast. I'm always happy to hear from you. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.